Hi, people. Take a couple of minutes here. We're going to be recording transactions instead of in a single column like we did in the spreadsheets in Chapter 1. Same stuff, except that we're going to be using the rules of debit and credit. We're going to be using accounts that take a basic form of a T. That's the conventional way of how an accounting system is designed today, whether it's done manually or whether it's done on a computer system. We record transactions in terms of debits and credits. Now, an account basic form in a simple form that we use for teaching and learning is the T account, where you can see that basic T in there. And your problems are set up. Problem to whatever they are, you're going to be putting the transactions into the T account form. Now, on the left, to learn an account, I don't care what kind of an account it is. Again, whether it's an asset or liability, the owner's equity account, revenues, expenses, or withdrawals, always left and right. Left means debit, right means credit. Left means debit, right means credit, credit means right, debit means left, period. Does not matter what kind of an account it is. So that's rule number one. Notice there are no plus and minus signs here. That's something that you have to learn. So you're going to have the title of the account, and you're going to have an account number from your chart of accounts, and you're going to have a left side and a right side specifically named debit and credit. We will get into increases and decreases in a couple of minutes. So the next slide that I want to show you here, if it comes up, that's interesting. Okay, let me scroll down here. Okay, again, we're not putting a title on this account. But if I asked you to prepare a trial balance, that means you have to calculate the balance of each account at the end of the month, let's just say. So that in order to determine how much is in an account, it's the side that has the greater number, the greater amount of entries minus the lesser amount. So without even saying pluses and minuses, without even putting a title on this account, if you've got two debits that add to 5,600 and one credit, or two credits that add to 900, then this account is said to have a debit balance. Simply you subtract the credit side, in this case, from the debit side to end up with a balance, so that if you had to list that on a form that we will be using called a trial balance, you list it as a debit balance of $4,700. Okay? Let's see what else we have here. Why isn't this cooperating with me? Okay, here are your rules. You may see, you do a web search, watch your videos, whatever. But see, as you get two sides of the equation, just like Chapter 1. Instead of having a single column for each asset, like cash and equipment and accounts receivable and so on, and accounts payable, notes payable, what you're going to have is T accounts in this chapter. Okay, the rules are, and you just have to memorize them, kids. Okay, the debit side is always the left side. Doesn't matter. These are your accounts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 6 accounts that you'll be dealing with. On the asset side, the rule is the debit adds to an asset. So that if I had to add to cash, I would enter a debit. If I had to add to equipment, I will enter a debit. If I had to reduce cash, I will enter a credit. So that if I had a transaction that said purchased equipment for cash, I certainly would have an equipment account in T form. I would debit the equipment account and credit the cash account, so I'd have equal debits and credits. That's a rule. If I borrowed money on account, the rule changes on the liability and the main owner's equity account. So that if you can see here, a left entry on the left side of the equation A debit entry on the left side of the equation is balanced with a right entry on the right side of the equation, so that if the owner invested money, I have to add to cash, add to capital. You would do that in a single column, wouldn't you? You would put a plus to cash and a plus to capital. You're doing the same thing here. You are debiting cash and crediting capital. That will follow the rules. The rules are that at least two accounts must be affected, and there has to be an equal amount of debits and credits. You will have to memorize this. I'm not going to lecture on it. Obviously, the withdrawals and revenue and expenses are parts of owner's equity. So every time I take money out, I will debit the withdrawals account and credit cash every time, and that will add to the amount of withdrawals. I keep debiting, debiting, debiting. I'm adding. If I accumulate revenue, you know I have to debit cash or accounts receivable to add to those assets and come over here to balance it with a credit. So it would be plus, plus. If I have to accumulate expenses, I debit, debit, debit to add up the expenses and credit the cash if I pay cash. So an expense would be a debit and a credit, recorded, a debit to expense, a credit to cash, or a debit to expense and a credit to accounts payable if you're going to pay later. Okay? So just you have to memorize the activity in these accounts. Main deal is debit, 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 debit means left. Credits mean right. It doesn't matter the type of the account. With respect to pluses and minuses, try to understand, if a debit increases the left side of the equation, a credit has to increase the right side of the equation. With the withdrawals and the revenues and expenses, you just have to realize that the plus signs in withdrawals and expenses are merely accumulations that will have a negative effect on capital, so that the debit really means a reduction in capital. The debit means an increase in the amount of withdrawals over a period of time. The same is true with the expenses. Don't confuse the plus with an addition to capital, because we see that when we debit an expense, it has the effect of a reduction. You remember that drill? We talked about it in Chapter 1. Okay? Now that's 7 minutes and 52 seconds. I'm going to come up with another one momentarily. Okay? But you have to learn these rules. I sound like I'm mad at you. I'm not. All right. Now let me just see where the next one's going to be, where we can pick up. A lot of detail here that's unnecessary. So I'm going to get. So when we start, next one here. No. Well, yeah, we'll start. Well, no. Okay. Good. Okay, we're going to start with this slide number 18 in just a second. Okay?